Thank you very much, Professor Sir Stephen Holgate. This was a fantastic presentation, and you could see the whole, the picture in the area within just 10 minutes. This is all about the experience and the way, he could see the things, from a bigger lens. So thank you very much for this fantastic presentation. And as you rightly said, it's all about connecting and collaborating and bringing, this multidisciplinarity. And this is where I guess, the community of the Reclaim Network, and I think you opened up an opportunity to link with the, with the clean air kind of, the program. So I think we definitely like to also promote it through our network channels to see, make those bridges there. So I think in the interest of time, we're gonna move to the next session, which is gonna be more of a panel discussion. There are a couple of questions I have, but then there is a lot more opportunity for you to ask questions from our panel members. So this time around, it's not about a person speaking from here. It's basically, trying to create this two-way dialogue between you and between our, the panelists. So I would like to invite our panelists here. So first and foremost, Dr. Simon Crook. So he's a senior portfolio manager for the UKRI EPSRC. So welcome, Simon. And our second panelist are Gwilym Owen. So he's resilience officer at Cardiff Council. Welcome. Our third panelist is Dr. Maria Athanassiadou. She is a scientific manager for urban climate services at the Met Office. Welcome, Maria. Last but not the least, we got Ben McCallan. He is a Greener Futures engagement lead at Surrey County Council and also the chair at Guildford, Zero Carbon Guildford. Ex-chair or former chair of I must say the founder of the, the Zero Carbon Guildford, one of the founders. So, so just to say that I've got a few questions to, break the ice, and could be an opportunity for each of you to, make some comments, if you wish to. And then in the end, what we'll do is we'll open the session for the questions and answer there. So just to start with, and linking with the Reclaim Network Plus, so you might know that there is a Natural England's greening policy, and that's basically aims to increase the green cover in urban residential areas up to 40%. So the question really is that the organizations you are representing, how are they contributing to this goal? What specific challenges do you anticipate? And what strategies or innovations will you employ to address them effectively? So there are basically three questions within one, but it's more around the greening policy there. So where do you want to start with? This one or that end? Who wants to take the lead first?
Shall I go then?
Yeah, maybe.
I don't know if I'm on. In fact, I'll just say, if I know my photographs are going to be that big, I'd have a much more blurry ones, I think, in this sense. Right, so at EPSRC, I mean, one thing we do is passive, if you like. It's you can all put in whatever you like, and we let them come in, and sometimes they get funded. So that's part of it. But also, we are putting much more in the way of sustainability into everything we fund, and how does it help the environment. Specifically in engineering, which is what I'm the senior manager in, we've got something called Tomorrow's Engineering Research Challenges, which is driving all our strategies. And a big part of that is using of green materials, looking at how we help the environment. And one of the quotes we have from the person who sort of launched all this is, by the time we finished all this, everything that's done should be making the planet a nicer place. So part of it is how do we do engineering without actually just taking from the planet every time we do some engineering research. Can we do that without adding to the problems? So we've got all of that, and we're about to have a panel which Prashant knows about because he's got a grant in it, on engineering healthier environments. And a lot of that can be in green spaces and making places nicer for people to be in so they're healthier, which feeds into an awful lot of what we've just had. That'd be me.
Yeah, thank you, Simon. Very, very good.
Yeah, so with Cardiff Council, with part of our sort of addressing the climate emergency, which we declared in 2019, we've got a One Planet Cardiff strategy, which is sort of like an overarching document about all the different things that we're going to do with an ambition to basically be sort of a net sort of carbon neutral city by 2030. And then within that, in terms of sort of green-blue infrastructure, we've got, there's a 10-year program, which is, it's called Coed Caerdydd, which that is basically woodland Cardiff or Cardiff woodland. And already in the first few years, we've planted sort of about 82,000 trees, and we're carrying on doing that. And then with that, it's sort of working within the communities as well. So it's heavily reliant on volunteers, and so there's an outreach with that. And the intention there is to be sort of educational, and also it's not just a case of, you know, just planting lots of trees and everything to reach a sort of a number or a milestone or anything like that. It's about sort of working out, you know, which trees should go where, talking to local communities. Also, if local people want trees in their gardens or whatever, then they can apply for them for free, things like that. And part of that is a commitment to raise the tree cover from, I think it was like 18.9% in 2021 to 25% in 2023. And that's obviously just the tree cover. So then on top of that, there's sort of other green initiatives as well. And that's including sort of changing the way the mowing's done and all that sort of stuff. And other things we're doing sort of on the blue infrastructure is things like Greener Grangetown, etc., which is sort of like a SUDS type of thing there. So in terms of sort of innovations, I suppose, well, there's that. And then, I mean, that will feed into one of the other questions later on, so I'll wait for that. But, you know, one of the innovations is that I think when I just checked the literature, I think Wales was the first place in the world where it's got a specific requirement for sustainable drainage for any sort of building development over 100 meters squared. So there's that. Yes, there's lots. And then one of the innovations we're looking at in terms of internal staff training is that if you go on to any of these sort of climate change related staff training aspects, then within, this is something that maybe all council employees should check, is within our HR, there's a thing where you're allowed a discretionary 5 days a year of volunteering. So, and we sort of unlock that specifically through there, and then feed that back into things like Coed Caerdydd, and then there'll be other sort of things through that as well. So we've had already sort of 40 volunteers come through of that, and then there's about, I think there's 14,000 employees in the council, so that's potential of 70,000 days worth of volunteering for green things, basically. So yeah, so it's things like that, basically.
That's fascinating. Yeah. Thank you very much. Well, yeah.
The Met Office has a net zero policy to 2030, so that's one of the ways. One thing we, as employees, were particularly proud is that the Met Office site, which moved to Exeter in 2003, has extensive tree planting, and since 2011, the site has held Wild Trust Biodiversity Benchmark Award. We have 600 different species of plants, insects, birds, mammals, reptiles, and fungi on site. Another way is through projects and collaborations. Extensive work with many partners on how weather and climate impacts on the natural and man-made environment. The Met Office works with Natural England on fire severity index, for example, supporting resilience and preparedness to fire risk, and thereby reducing the risk and impacts from wildfires. Participate in the SPF Clean Air. I won't say anything more about that. And various projects like the do green spacing mapping, so Earth observation projects with SMEs to develop enhancements of mapping current and changing green infrastructure in the urban environment. On the challenges, climate change poses many challenges and to the both natural and urban environment. And through changing temperatures, patterns, frequency, intensity, precipitation, but also changing human behavior, as we have heard some of the. So the Met Office is focusing on continuing to advance climate science and projections and on ensuring that these are appropriate, usable, and used by all organizations and individuals. And we have an extensive program of applied research that is specifically focused on address real-world needs to support the understanding and actions required to both reduce climate change and its impacts, and also to enhance our environment and health.
Perfect, yeah, thank you.
I'll speak with my county council hat on, because obviously as a charity there's a lot less we can do about it. So Surrey County Council is the Tier 1 local authority. We're responsible for the local nature recovery strategy. We've got the statutory duty to deal with that. Our tree planting strategy sits under that. So our tree planting strategy has target of 1.2 million trees, which is basically one per person. I can't actually remember. Does anyone in placemaking there remember how many trees we're at so far? Is it 400,000? Putting you on the spot here. It's a lot. It's a lot of trees. So 200 last month. There you go. Those three planted 200 trees last month. So we're on track, I think. Basically, I think Jane's point earlier was quite good, Jane from Earthwatch. There's a lot of strategies, a lot of policy that comes out. And what we don't obviously need at the minute, given the state of ecological crisis, is more strategies and not a lot happening. So while Surrey has the responsibility for the local nature recovery strategy, we've got 11 districts and boroughs who are responsible for all the planning. And the green cover, just like biodiversity net gain, all comes down to planning. So you can have these strategies, but ultimately when developers say we're going to put this amount of green-blue infrastructure in somewhere, or we're going to increase biodiversity by 10%, you've got to be able to enforce that through planning. And unfortunately, like many local authority departments, planning departments are really stretched. So whether this actually turns into proper action on the ground is another thing to be seen. And that is a huge challenge, I think, which without a lot more investment in local authority ability to do some of this means it's really difficult. It's fine having the piece of paper, but how are we actually going to deliver on it? So it's a big challenge. For us, urban greening is one of our key priorities. We've got 6 priorities within the local nature recovery strategy: waterways, parks, woodland, etc. And urban areas are one of them, which I'll chat a bit more about later.
Yeah, thank you very much. So I think you rightly mentioned a lot of challenges, and I think there was quite a lot of opportunities as well in terms of building upon the existing resources or looking for the new funding opportunities there. Obviously, there's always want more and more to do things. But then if you just follow up this question for the second one, which is advice, let's say, for achieving it. So based on your experience, what practical advice or key insights you would share with others aiming to achieve, let's say, this 40% green cover target in urban areas? Just focusing on the advice itself. Maybe we could start with you, Simon, again.
We don't really particularly set targets ourselves for greening areas, so what we tend to do is support other people to reach those targets. So I think maybe from EPSRC's point of view, we could do with being better connected to what you guys do and the networks doing there, so we can bring other networks together and get them all working a little bit stronger and reach that target yourselves. So it's really not, we're a step back, if you like, from all that. It's not
my feeling is that the UKRI has put that mechanism in place because lots of grants now, or the calls coming up, are multidisciplinary, yes. And they like to see the collaboration, the community engagement. So this is a fantastic thing to see, to also the kind of providing the motivation for people to come together to do this fantastic job.
Yeah, so we're funding a whole host of networks just in engineering in the next month, really. Yep. We're announcing a whole 7 network pluses, so the same as this, £10 million worth. in February 11th, big announcement to the Royal Academy. That's all engineering challenges. And then we've got this whole panel going on the healthy environments we mentioned, and that should be another 6, maybe a bit more if we find the infamous money down the sofa that we have to fund some more.
Perfect, yeah. So I think these are fantastic opportunities for people to come together on these.
I think it's imperative for us to link them all together.
Gwilym?
Yeah, so I think the main one is really just collaborative working and working with the communities and doing that in consultation and sort of as soon as you can, really. And because if you don't, I mean, there's been, well, I mean, the Greener Grangetown, it was kind of done to the community, for want of a better word, and there was a lot of people that obviously really didn't like that, and car parking spaces were taken out, and that's obviously a really hot topic for people, and yeah, there was a lot of pushback and the like, and it was only sort of when it was done that people could then start to see all the various benefits and the like from it. But and then the good thing with that is that you can now use that as a signpost for anything similar. So we'll be doing, we learned a lot from that. So there's sort of proper consultations going out to one that's happening, that we plan to do in Whitchurch and things like that. So it really is engaging people as quickly as possible, collaborative purposes, things like that, and just also listening to local communities, because there's a wonderful initiative now that's being created in one of the sort of the poorer areas of Cardiff called Splot, and there was a piece of land right next to the railway line there, and it's now been transformed into this really great sort of multifunctional site, which has a lot of biodiversity and green spaces called Railway Gardens, and it's a real beacon for that sort of thing. And then it helps as a community hub because it brings people in, and it's very educational and can signpost people towards things like allotments and stuff, and allow people to sort of work for themselves and the like. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Is there anything else you wanted to add, Maria?
Yeah, something completely different.
Okay.
It links to, I think, in one sentence, the advice, don't look just at the number, 40%. As we have seen throughout the day, the benefits from green cover are sort of spanning a lot of, they are varied and spanning physical and mental health. And so just looking at 40%, probably this has already ingrained existing social inequalities through location, vulnerability, and stuff. So the physical impact, especially linked to location of green spaces and reducing with distance. So the climate change also, green space planning needs to allow for climate change to ensure that planning and impact are suitable and continue to provide the benefit. So don't just look at the 40%, but also it's equally more important to see where the allocation, because you might see more benefits even for less than 40% effectively. Otherwise,
Yeah, I think it's a very good point. So it's not just the number; it's more about how and
especially
where
in the urban
this is
environment.
going. Yeah, perfect. Yeah, thank you very much. Ben, anything else?
Well, that actually tees up quite a nice example of right behind us. So if you don't live in Guildford, you're actually about 100 metres away at the minute from the most polluted stretch of highway in the UK. The NO levels are like crazy high compared to everywhere else. And it sits right next to we call them key neighbourhoods, so they're areas of deprivation in Surrey. It's number 3 behind here. So you've got people who are already struggling with a lot of things, who just got air pollution pouring right over, and you did some work with the school on the other side. But often these communities are the hardest to engage because they've got so much else on their plate, unfortunately, going on. So I think the point about not doing stuff to communities is really important, but we actually had the conversation at lunch about taking car parking spaces away. There is always quite a lot of opposition to this sort of thing, I think, and there's so many co-benefits that we're maybe not communicating particularly well. So I think in terms of the collaboration part, there's no way local authorities can actually deliver any of this on their own. So getting community groups, getting them out as the catalyst into these key neighbourhoods, as we call them in Surrey, to actually start delivering benefits for people's everyday life, hopefully is how you start building some of that momentum to putting in place. So I think there is a lot of opportunity for bringing a lot of people along with it, especially after what we just heard about the like real ranging impacts on health. But it's having enough people to go out and do all that engagement to start with, really, that is, the flip side of that opportunity. It is a real challenge. So.
Yeah, so I believe that the key themes basically emerging is looking into the collaboration with the communities of doing those co-design and co-own the solutions by engaging the communities. And I guess you made a right point in terms of it's not just making that number, it's also getting the right things at the right place as well, and it's spread out to benefit the community, especially the more disadvantaged communities.
But they're related, isn't it? So as scientists, we identify where the hotspots are, if you like, that's both air quality, heating, or whatever, and then properly identify the obvious, and then focus our efforts into the areas, give them priority effectively. Yes, we need to do it everywhere, but where do we start?
I mean, we talked about the stakeholders there, but just to elaborate it a little bit more on that point, who do you see as the most critical stakeholders in achieving, let's say, these greening goals or the green agenda we have, and what approaches or strategies can we adopt to engage them in a diverse and the inclusive range of stakeholders more effectively?
I think there's two parts, isn't there? Because there's the part that is sort of a requirement. So we're talking about BNG, biodiversity net gain, and the green cover. That a lot comes down to planning departments and developers. Like Guildford's actually got, Guildford Borough Council has a higher, it's 10% nationally, but Guildford's actually gone for 20% requirement for biodiversity net gain on new developments. Whether that can actually happen or not, we don't know. It's to be tested because the developer could say, well, I've hit 10%, so would it hold up in a court of law if the council was trying to get them to go to 20%? Don't know yet. But actually, if they can still enforce it, as I said before. So there's that whole part of the requirements of new development, residential for the green cover and BNG. And then there's the whole part of the retroactive urban greening, isn't there? And that part obviously needs communities to deliver it. But I think one of the ones we haven't mentioned so far as well is all the asset holders of all the buildings, because what it's been like. I'll talk about it a bit in my slides later. But it is really difficult to find locations to actually install GBI without doing it from a planning sense. Like if you're going back and trying to do it, it's actually really challenging. And in a town centre where you'd have the most benefit for like urban cooling, for example, Guildford has a few asset managers who are not necessarily all keen to do much with their buildings. We have just cracked the nut with one of them. We've just put a little roof garden on one of the shopping centres, which is great, but it's the first time. I complained about this a lot actually at the last, when we were at the Barbican, about all those challenges of how difficult it is to get some of this moving. So that's a really good step forward, but the shop owners, the people when you go and talk about in town centres where you want to do some of this, they don't own the building, they've probably got minimal say. Finding the right person to talk to is difficult. So I don't know whose role that is, maybe local authorities as well at the district and borough level. It's bringing all those asset managers together, the BIDs, the business improvement districts, and actually having a joined up plan to start doing it, I think is probably one of the key bits we've not mentioned so far.
Yeah, thank you. You want to add anything?
Just say everyone is a stakeholder equally, as demonstrated, from the public to all the way up to government. Just to say the way we see like the most effective way to engage is demonstrating the full breadth of benefits. These benefits are obvious to those working in the field, like all of us, but actually they're not always obvious to others. So making that obvious, the thing that's obvious to us as scientists or community or hub, to everyone, like every shop owner or...
Yep, fine.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say obviously the community, general public, etc., especially if you get them on board, and then especially then if they can then see those benefits directly occurring to them, then hopefully that raises their awareness and then maybe starts encouraging them to be more considerate towards sort of biodiversity and climate change related issues, and they might be more sort of vocal in terms of supporting those sorts of things going forwards, which could then obviously help with sort of government decision making, things like that. So that's one sort of group of people. Then obviously we've got sort of all of our partners, etc., and that includes again business. So you mentioned bids. We've got a bid there, which is there, and it all depends on the people that run those sort of organisations. So we've got quite a progressive bid when it comes for Cardiff. So they're very good when it comes to green infrastructure and things like that. And then again, there's a lot of key landowners within Cardiff. So there's a very big sort of landowner called Landsec, and then it's sort of working with them in terms of sort of encouraging different land use within the estate, as it were. And they own sort of two of the biggest shopping centres in the area, and they're quite progressive actually, because one of the things that's happened there is that as in Guildford, where it looks like you're knocking down your Debenhams, we've got Debenhams as well, and their plan there is to turn that into a big sort of square, a green area, which will be right in the centre of Cardiff, which is very sort of concretey at the moment. So you'll have that sort of green space like right in the centre there. So and I think they're looking at that as a model where it will actually be a sort of an attractive draw to people. So they're looking at it actually as a form of increasing footfall and the like. And you know, the, retail is shrinking as such in terms of everything's going online. And certainly in Cardiff, I don't know whether you've noticed it in your own cities, but Cardiff is really turning into a place where you go out and eat and do lifestyle entertainment things, and the amount of shops selling physical things is really receding. So I think they're being quite sort of proactive when it comes to that, enlightened. Yeah.
Perfect, yeah, thank you. Do you want to add anything?
Well, I like the Debenhams Was Here project. That sounds good. Again, it's always a little bit different with research councils because we're not directly involved as a primary person with these things, but there's a couple of things where we probably need to try and work closer with the academics and also some of the users. I mean, one of the things I've seen across all of engineering is we're funding some fantastic whizzy ideas, some things that really could make a difference. Mm-hmm. And then they hit the regulations and insurance brick wall. And, you know, is it actually really going to get out of a lab and put in a city? Is it going to be used across all of the UK and not just be a little show-off project in a small area somewhere? And it's getting that kind of regulation system. Maybe something we can link with the universities a bit to try and make a bit of a noise to get people in the room to talk about this. So that's one thing that's been exercised in our mind is we're funding these things, or are they going to get out? And then the other one is, as you're all aware, we've had a change of government, and so we're quietly watching, especially the likes of Rachel Reeves and what she wants to drive the economy with. And we keep hearing the word growth, and so we've got to now turn the word growth into something that growth means we can do all this and it adds to growth, and there's no reason it shouldn't. It's just a way of getting that ammunition to make the case to government for the Treasury to give the money to us, not to other areas.
Perfect, yeah, thank you. So I will not take long, so this is the last question. No, so I think I've got one more question, then we can open up, if you don't mind, to wait for another maybe 5-10 minutes. So maybe brief comment on this last one. It's more about learning from the successful kind of, the projects. So do you have any example of a successful, let's say, the green-blue infrastructure, the project or a structure? What lessons possibly we can learn from it and how they can be applied in the future initiatives?
Shall I start? Yeah, so speaking with my charity hat on, we've been doing a couple of little projects with little grant pots. I'll run through them a little bit later. As I just said, the last one we did, we managed to get money from the CSR part of a local asset manager, which is pretty good. It's the first time we've managed to do it. So they chipped in £5,000 for us to do some work on the roof, along with Surrey Wildlife Trust. I'm not sure where Claire's gone. She's here somewhere. There you go. Claire from Surrey Wildlife Trust gave us a couple of grand to do it, and then we went up and did the work on there. So that was a pretty good one, not just in terms of doing it, but actually managing to get money as a case study that we can go to other businesses and say, look, other people are using it for CSR. So it's a good example. I think you've still got all the issues with the bigger stuff. Like, it's really hard to do the bigger stuff when you're not doing it at planning. And yesterday, actually, when we were chatting about the board, like, I think 3 of us mentioned all the objections to anything that might make, like, insects appear, for example. Like, no one wants to be swatting wasps off while they're eating a lolly in the summer, obviously. But, like, is it really that big a deal when, like, Surrey, for example, has lost 11% of its native species, all gone extinct in the last few decades? Like, there's a real balance to be struck here, I think, in terms of getting enough good quality material and case studies to demonstrate those benefits to bring the public along. So a lot of work to do, I think.
Perfect, yeah, thank you.
I will be a bit cheeky, and instead of one project, I would like to mention, let's not forget the success over the years. The prevalence of urban parks in the UK is a major example of successful green and blue infrastructure that have been benefit the UK for more than 100 years. So an example of that, in Exeter in 1891, 130-something years ago, they built the St. Thomas People's Park, designed as a safe space for children and vulnerable people, but particularly children. So that was 4 acres of park, with 3 of which were reserved just for children, so effectively for vulnerable people. And the success to me is like 130 so years, it still serves exactly the same purpose and benefits the local community. And I think, to me, this is success. If we can do the same for the urban environment that have this length of time, I think this is how you measure success, or one of the ways you measure success.
Perfect, yeah, thank you. I think Gwilym was talking about having that building turn into park. I think this is looks like a fantastic initiative to bring some greening in the core of the city, where it's full of the grey structures. So do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I mean, for us, the one I sort of really think about is the Greener Grange town. It's also because of all of the learning that came from it as well, and you know, arguably it didn't start out very well, but that's all part of the learning. You know, to do well, to succeed, you've got to fail first, haven't you? Really. So there was one could argue there was a bit of failure there, and it's just sort of learning from that, and then that's really sort of governed a lot of how we sort of do a lot of our outreach, because I mean that was back in 2018, and there was a lot of things about learning how to then move that on to a lot of other successful sort of SUDS type projects and the like. So there was definitely a lot of learning from that, and it's also, I think that might have been the catalyst that actually encouraged us to. There's a lot of covered over canals in Cardiff, because it was obviously a huge industrial city, and we've just uncovered a whole section of canal there. So you've now got this kind of small sort of park area, and that's all sort of green-blue infrastructure. And I think a lot of that was born out of the understanding of what we did with Greener Grange Town. So, and then the other thing is, if anyone kicks up a fuss, you can just point to that and go, well, this is how it'll all look, you know. And the people, the residents that lived there, obviously they were really complaining, and now their house prices have gone up. So I don't think people generally complain about that. So yeah.
Perfect, yeah.
So I think for us, rather than point at one thing, it's more how, if I look at EPSRC's research profile, it's gone from lots of itty-bitty bits here and there to, you know, we've got something like Reclaim, we've got grants coming through now, we've got Big Coal coming through, we've got, we just funded a big one in SUDS, so you just mentioned that. We've got sort of a critical mass of things we could bring together, and I'll point out these are all things that are helping the environment and are helping build cities, and I think we've got it's coming together rather than little bits in here. There's actually lots of critical mass there. That's a nice thing to see happening.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a very good point. I think we will not now let you keep waiting, so maybe we could take the questions. I guess you had one here, then one there, and there's one on the other side.
Yeah, hi. Thanks, Prashant, and thank you to all the panel and people that have presented before. It's, fantastic set of ideas and concepts here. I'm one of the clean air champions along with Stephen Holgate, and in the air pollution arena, we're getting increasing, I suppose, criticism that we're setting these sort of grand top-level targets like limit values on air pollution, or perhaps the parallel is in this arena, the 40% tree cover that you talked about before, Prashant, or I've heard the 330, 300 guideline as well for green space. And all of these things are being done, and we're mindful, with mental and physical health and well-being at its heart. But I don't think we are, as a community in air pollution, sufficiently placing public health practitioners really at the forefront of the way in which we go about it. As you were saying earlier, the places where you choose to have the interventions. So my question here, especially for the people that are working in local authorities, is do you, before you do anything, ask the public health people where would the greatest gain be? Do we need a larger research base on this, or do we just need to be working together to actually maximise the public health gains from this by placing public health practitioners really at the lead of these things?
Okay, so it looks like it's Gwilym and Ben. So do you want to have any comment?
We do that a bit. So I've had, I obviously work on engagement, so I have actually had GPs from across Surrey talking about air pollution, climate change, and trying to start stitching some of this together. So speaking from like our example, we've got 4 strategic priorities in Surrey. Surrey's Greener Future, which I lead on the engagement across, tackling health inequality, empowering communities, and a sustainable economy that benefits everybody. Not going to go into that now. But a lot of work. We've got those 4 strategic priorities and then 7 directorates, right, happening underneath them. So actually the work kind of happens in silos a lot under those directorates rather than working together to the 4 strategic priorities, which seems like a crazy way to do it. And we are really trying to join up a lot more across the strategic priorities. But it does mean that sometimes you miss a lot of that expertise coming in. So we're definitely trying. And the health, there's obviously, health team within Surrey County Council, a big one. And they've produced some really good research recently. I didn't know until they produced something, but we've actually got 3 of the mosquitoes in Surrey now that cause 3 tropical diseases. So we are starting to do it, but I would say it definitely doesn't happen at the level that it could be. And a lot of that, I suppose, is to just do with, again, coming back to this resource part. Everybody is so stretched. It is really difficult to do a lot of that. Although that should go into a lot of the co-creation of planning, I don't think it's anywhere close to where it should be, despite some good efforts to try.
Yeah, I think that last point is we've literally got no money. And we don't have the staff either. I mean, there's loads of things that have been identified, and it's just a case of, well, we either don't have the people to do it or we can't afford it and the like. But in terms of air pollution, yeah, I think we've done quite a good job of mapping where the worst areas are within Cardiff. We've got these monitoring stations around. One of the things that we're planning on.
My point wasn't really about air pollution, but it was just trying to see whether your agenda can learn from the criticisms that we're receiving in the air pollution arena. So it's not about air pollution, it's about integrating public health, not just as a co-benefit, but actually as one of the primary directions behind the vision, and well as the implementation of the greening that you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, there's a good document out which came out a few years ago with the Cardiff and Vale Health Board, which was basically showing, I think the last the presentation about air pollution. You've got a situation where a lot of the worst air pollution is in the poorest areas. So we're aware of that, and unfortunately, there's a very big main road that goes through that, and then you're going to have all the different political pressures and all that sort of stuff. So it's, I don't know, I would argue that we're aware of it, and it's just a case of whether we're going to be courageous enough to do something about it. I think, unfortunately, is the real truth. Because one of the things I noticed on the slide is there's a Welsh index of multiple deprivation, and you've got Riverside and Grangetown are sort of two of the worst, and then sort of lowest 10% in Wales, which means they're pretty low nationwide. The populations in there are predominantly Pakistani and Bangladeshi, and I noticed on that slide it's the people that are most affected are Pakistani and Bangladeshi. So it's kind of like, it was I was like, oh, that's interesting. But yeah, I mean, that's the thing. It's again, it's that sort of political will, I suppose, is one level also. You know, it's like, are we courageous enough to do that thing?
I think that's a really good point, I think. And I think if there's opportunity to team up here, I'd be really keen to chat, because it's not really at an officer level. I've used that 43,000 stat that Stephen had on his thing, average deaths in a council, that came back and said, well, hang on, that's not true. That's a lie. One person that ever has been recorded as dying from air pollution. But obviously, that's what went on the coroner's certificate as one person. But that isn't, ignoring the other 42,000. My maths is terrible at the minute, 999, I think that's right, that obviously died related to air pollution. So I think if there's an opportunity to build more evidence collaboratively, both health, the climate side, community side would really welcome it. So you've just volunteered yourself for a bit of work there, I would say.
Yeah, thank you very much. So I think we take one from there.
Can you hear me? Good. I'm actually, I guess, an empirical ecologist who's fallen among environmental scientists today. I was recently talking to a chap from NPL, who don't seem to be here today, about a project they were involved in relating to air quality, where they were monitoring heavy metals, etc., using air filters. And they then found out that they could actually pick up eDNA from the same filters, which they had archived. And it struck me that that would actually be quite an interesting way of moving towards looking at pathogens in the air. I don't know whether that has been done or not, but it seems to me that if you're looking at health, you've got two things. You've got the mineral side of things, and you've also got the organisms as well. And I just wondered whether any work has been done on that. And I guess that's probably for Stephen Holgate and for poor old the meteorological people. But I'd be interested to hear.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if Stephen or maybe Gary, you wanted to comment on this question. I know that there is a lot going on in this arena, and COVID was a prime example, which really triggered a lot more work through the number of committees and all. So
yeah, well, that's a great question, and thank you very much, because obviously viruses are particles of about the size we've been talking about today. And yeah, there's been quite a lot of research actually doing what you suggested, and to track public health spread of infectious disease by sampling air in different environments. Obviously, sampling indoors really led to this sort of policy change, which was quite dramatic during COVID-19, about the way that that virus was handed from one person to another. But outside in the streets, a lot of work. And I would say that most of this really good work has been done in Southeast Asia. So it's been done in Hong Kong, China, and places like that. And there may be a reason for that, in that the humid environment sort of keeps these organisms up in the air longer than it would do in a cold environment like here outside the hall today, So, but I think it's a great area, and environmental research itself is, of course, using DNA and nucleic acid to track all sorts of environmental changes, in our watercourses and in our soil and so on. So the air is just another place where I think we need some better science, but it's a great opportunity, and I value the comment very much.
perfect. Yeah, thank you very much. Okay, so I think we had one question from this side. Yep. Felicity.
Thank you very much. I was really interested in the discussion around the Natural England 40%. I think the urban greening factor is 40% green space from above for residential areas and 30% for industrial non-residential areas in towns and cities. And whilst kind of we can look to the planning system to deliver some of that, so I'm from Portsmouth City Council, we know in Portsmouth we can't do it through new development alone, and therefore we're looking, potentially to reach figures like that, we're looking at retrofit, and to reach 40% green or 30% green in industrial areas, we're looking at potentially looking at green roofs. And I think one of the hard things is we see sort of technologies or solutions being pushed out without the kind of pathway to do that, even feasibility about is that even realistic in our area? So there's, I think, a challenge for local authorities in terms of having access to data. So I know, like in China and Germany, they've been able to use, aerial imagery or satellite photography to look at towns and go, okay, in that town, X% of those buildings could have a green roof, and then you could put your heat. And we just don't have those pathways, which means we can't develop those kind of theory of change models to kind of go, okay, what needs to happen across the whole of the system, for example, if we were to go forward with pushing green roofs in our area. So I wonder whether people like the EPSRC.
Close enough.
Yeah, is that close enough? I've completely got. It's how can we use data and work together and resolve some of those also issues and challenges we might have from. If, for example, we're to say, well, actually, we've got opportunity for green roofs here, here, and here, how can we then advance that technology into those settings and, ensure that they're performing right? But actually, how do we build the pathway to do that in the first place? Because we just don't have the access to data.
So there's a couple of things from EPSRC there, in that a lot of the time what we fund is driven by what are we asked to do? We might not necessarily do or have the data exactly you want, but we've been asked to do something similar in another area. I know we've just funded a project where someone's basically driving around Britain and looking at the heat register of every house in the country, so they can see where they need to put some kind of mediation into effect in certain towns and cities to make them more efficient. But one of the things we've really pushed quite aggressively in the last few years is that everything we fund is now open source. So it's all out there, all the data and everything's there for people to look at and get the results and work on that. And the name of who did it is there, so you can talk to them to get advice. One of the problems we do have is, and it's every single area of science, it's not just EPSRC, it's medicine and BBSRC, it's just the sheer amount of data and where we put it and how the heck do we access it. And every area is telling us this and expecting us to magically fix it. We can't just magically fix it because it's hellishly expensive for a start, and it needs clever people to work out how we do your best access and interface. And so in some areas we are moving ahead with this, and there's big multi-million-pound projects on data access and data keeping data and all those kind of things. So it's something it's getting fixed, but it's not going to be overnight just because of the size of it.
Thank you. Yeah, that's very helpful. Any more questions? Yeah, one from here, and then there is another one there.
It's on, isn't it? Ben, can I just ask you a quick question? You said something about taking your tree canopy, your biodiversity net gain to 20 rather than 10%. Are you embedding that in local plan or neighbourhood plan or anything that you've got any possibility at all to be able to challenge developers on?
So it's Guildford.
Yes.
Borough Council that is responsible for it, so not Surrey. I work for Surrey.
I know you do. Yeah.
So they've put it in there. It's part of their, I think it is part of their local plan. It's part of their climate change strategy. Is there anyone from GBC here who's better informed on this than me? No. Oh, none of you will know if I get it wrong then. So they are going to attempt to do it, and there is one other one in Surrey that's gone 20% as well. I think it might be Epsom, but I can't remember. So Surrey, this is another one of those tricky ones where Surrey has a local nature recovery strategy. We employ the officer that looks after biodiversity net gain, but all of it actually has to happen in the district and boroughs. So to go back to your point earlier about like the lack of connecting, we do try and make sure that happens, but it's actually really difficult to end up delivering it, like a lot of things with planning, unfortunately. So We'll see. I mean, it's the same with anything, isn't it? It's the same with the amount of, affordable housing in new developments. That often a certain amount will go in, doesn't always get delivered, and the planning system can't necessarily do a lot about it. We've got a Debenhams, as you mentioned, going in here with very similar sounding plans. We've got another big development going on, which did in the plans have a green roof go on it, which has now gone out the window because of cost. So a lot of these things go in, they get passed, and then they don't necessarily happen. So it is a real problem that I don't think anybody has got a good grip on, and obviously the planning system has, it's chopping and changing lots. It's not planning officers' faults, but it is really difficult to be able to enforce a lot of this, I think. So to be seen, I think, is probably the answer.
So in answer to the question, you don't know if it's in the local plan or the neighbourhood plan, but that's what you think it is?
The local plan was done before BNG came out, before it had to go into force, so it might not be in that. It's definitely in the climate change plan for Guildford. No, there's neighbourhood plans for the parishes surrounding Guildford, but I think just a local plan for Guildford. I think that's correct. Again, I don't work for GBC, but I think that is right. Yeah.
Thank you. And if you can speak your name and affiliation as well, so it could be beneficial to the community when you're asking the question there. I think we got one from Charlotte, I believe, and then we got one from Richard. So I know the people in the audience as well, by name.
Prashant. Thank you. Yeah, Charlotte Glazier again, thank you. It was just picking up on the green roofs and the retrofit, and having worked in inner city local authorities, BNG 20% of nothing. And if you're having green infrastructure up on roofs, then it's not serving the communities, and it's not serving, the reduction on flood risk with the sustainable urban drainage. You're not getting the tree canopy and the shade, and you're not getting the social aspects, and that you naturally bump into people at ground level, and that's where the sort of social interactions take place more. I'm speaking as someone who actually has like a roof garden on our block of flats, but we just don't go there because it's, the direction of travel is going downstairs and, onto the street, because that's where you go out every day. So, it's just kind of observations of different conversations, and I think the real opportunity is really on the highways, because we have the parks which are already green, and if we do uplift on there with BNG, you're getting maybe like a 0.2 to a 0.3, 0.4. But if you start with a sealed surface such as a greater green, you're getting an uplift from a 0 up to a 0.4, which is your 40%, and the kind of repurposing there. And that's where you can get all your multiple benefits and all your social aspects and your health and well-being. So I think it is a tricky end of the stick, and it does involve collaboration with all the other different departments. But I think that's where the opportunity is, because if you look at just the planning system, you're looking at the red lines, and you're limited to what you can deliver. What we need to be doing is something that is about equality and about fairness across the whole sort of boroughs, and which isn't dependent on the bids or the planning of new development. That can be, a model that can be retrofit in its own right. So that's kind of the sort of door that I keep knocking, and I'm sort of keep bulldozing and getting into trouble for. But I am making progress, and there is a lot of stuff happening there, and I'm happy to share different experiences of 20 years of local authority and sort of recent wins. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. If any one of you want to make any comment? It's more or less...
Just quickly to make a comment that, yes, the green-blue infrastructure, it serves many purposes. So, yes, to have a green roof, it will depend on the morphology of the city, if you like. So if you have very dense, very high city kind of thing, and you put a green roof, helps with albedo, but it doesn't cool the street. It doesn't help with flooding and everything. On the other hand, it can have benefits for different morphologies, because, two-story buildings or something, for example, or and it might not be good for mental health, although people could use it, I guess, more. Have garden parties up there as a community. It's how you use the space. I agree with what you say. I'm just saying that different green-blue interventions, if you like, some are serve multiple purposes. So people socializing, flooding, surface flooding, or thing. Others are more limited, but it doesn't mean they might be the only reason. For example, if you have like a wall, again, it cools the building, so the whole city kind of in that sense, but not other. So that's why it's not the percentage, but it's what is appropriate and for what purpose you're using that.
Yeah, so the cautious selection is very important, but also depends on the primary objective, that what exactly we wanted to achieve from it.
Yeah, the benefit.
So the benefits are, they become quite important. Obviously on the green roofs, you get the benefit of the energy savings. During the heat days, I think they do make a huge difference, especially when, you got, and we are getting longer, the summers and quite intensive kind of hot days there. Obviously, then the flooding, they do help actually in terms of reducing the peak flow. But it depends on then again, how big the roofs are. So I believe that they got their advantages and disadvantages in a sense. So it's really important then to think about the purpose and then, what sort of, the benefits you want to harvest from them. We go to Richard.
Yes, thanks, Prashant. Richard Sabin from Growing Revolution. My question is going to be about how to finance green infrastructure. And my frustration around that comes from picking up a comment that Maria made about expanding on the multiple benefits of green infrastructure. We work in the commercial world, so we have commercial clients as well as public body clients too. And there's these multiple benefits that we all know about, and we could go on about, in terms of stormwater attenuation, thermal protection, public health and well-being, all that sort of benefit that comes across there, but the funding is generally single-source funding. So we get funded to do air pollution reduction. Are these plants... We often... The flavour of the month was about decarbonisation, and the sort of look on people's faces that would start to fall away as they realised that actually putting in some green infrastructure wasn't going to do masses of work for their decarbonisation, but it would solve their local air pollution, it would solve local biodiversity in terms of green corridors, but that wasn't what their funding was for. Does the panel have any thoughts on how we can get funding pools that are less single-issued and more holistic? Because we have a holistic climate change issue to which we need holistic solutions, and green infrastructure is perfect for it, but sometimes we miss out simply because the funding is being offered into the wrong places.
That's a really good point. Any of the colleagues want to make any?
No, if anyone finds out the answer, please tell me.
Yeah, we got an answer here.
Fully agree, by the way. It's,
Thank you. Hi, Stuart Kirk, Schumacher Institute, formerly worked for DEFRA and the Environment Agency. And we have the same problems. And working with DEFRA, produced a project called the Local Action Plans, and the only solution we came up with for that was to get the economists, first of all, and work out costs and benefit in doing all these things, start the conversation about what type of plans you want, and invite in everybody with a relative interest. Because what we found was we couldn't do much blue-green changes in the cities for one purpose, but if you actually declare that it's a multi-purpose, it takes a long time, and you get the funders in, you get the real estate agents in, because they realise that if you're greening along a canal, how property prices go up. There was actually, we found, quite a lot of money out there. You just had to spend 6 months or so announcing what you're doing and inviting people to the party. Thank you.
It's a stupid problem, I agree. Like, one of the other things along that is we had, I've forgotten what it's called, biodiversity installation, green blue infrastructure installing company come to a Surrey Wildlife Trust breakfast, actually it was. I can't remember what the name of the company was. And he said that when they were looking at how to sell green blue infrastructure, they thought a lot of it would be to do with biodiversity, et cetera, and actually it turns out that now these big corporations are doing like whatever they can for staff, attract the best and retain the best talent, and it can make a huge difference. So where they were all looking potentially at doing something, it actually flipped. So they were all trying to green up their estates a lot more, and that is perhaps another hook as well. In Surrey, I mentioned I wasn't going to wade knee-deep into the fourth strategic priority in Surrey being a sustainable economy which benefits all, which isn't really what it says on the tin. But actually they get a lot of the money for certain things going on. So Shared Prosperity Fund, for example, they might start getting. So that is a good way to potentially look at how some of that money could go to businesses to do some of that as well. So that is another potential hook along the same line.
European Blue-Green Cities Network are packed with examples like that. Lisbon is a particularly good example where they put the call out, they got different funders in, and within a few years managed to transform the prospect of the city. So very messy, but seems to be the only way.
If we had more money as local authorities, it would make sense to go back to what I said before and team up across the strategic priorities, but we've just got so little cash in the minute, like it's so difficult from that perspective.
On the green finance or the financing green, part of the research that I did on the Natural Investment Readiness Fund project, which was entitled Green Finance for Islington Pocket Park Framework, basically looking at the case for scaling up, because everybody here is completely aware of the benefits of these types of interventions, was having done a lot of research in alternative finance. What we actually came across, or actually what I stumbled across at the last sort of hurdles of the research, was that looking at TNFD and the green taxonomy and the new sort of potential drivers coming in to create a new market for enabling green infrastructure, whilst those were very immature, we started looking at the sort of scope 2 and scope 1 and scope 3 drivers. Now, most companies, I started speaking to sort of contractors, major contractors in the UK, because I thought, right, who's going to be interested in delivering green infrastructure? Obviously developers are, because it's going to benefit the area and all the economy benefits that you just mentioned. But one of the key things was actually most businesses, corporate businesses, have got their scope 1 and 2 sorted out. They're good. But on the scope 3, they're really struggling how to deliver the scope 3 emissions. And so what they're looking at doing is saying, right, along our supply chain, we've got our immediate bases covered, but we can't, how do we reduce or give benefits to further, subcontractors? And so we actually managed to find a major contractor, who said that they would pay for 10 pocket parks in Islington without a return on investment, purely because they could look at the social value and impact of that, and that it would mitigate some of the scope 3 emissions, which is quite radical. So what I'm saying is that there could be new opportunities to deliver blue and green infrastructure through the need to report back on scope 3. Because how else do you mitigate that? And it's by these legacy projects, it's by these legacy social impact and social value projects. Now, I actually left the council where I managed to get that arrangement in place. So, that was agreed in principle. So, but it does tell you that the tide is changing, and that a lot of the corporates are actually looking for ways to, fund projects like these, because they can't deliver against their scope 3. Thank you.
Okay, fantastic. So thank you. So I think we got one question there. Paul, Sophia. So I can prove that I know people actually, not from this side as well. Yeah. Please say your name and the affiliation before you ask the question.
Thanks, Prashant. Paul Cartwright from Bracknell Forest Council. I'd just like to comment on what you've just said there. I think that's a really strong message. One of the things I was thinking about earlier off the back of one of the sessions this morning was the lack of corporate corporate organisations attending this sort of function, particularly for that reason. We're all saying that we're struggling for funding, and if the organisations have a requirement from a regulatory or financial perspective to invest in these sorts of things, and if we can get them along to these sorts of things, they can see the challenges that we collectively have.
So just one thing to note in Surrey is, so we do, obviously on my side, deal with TCFD quite a lot and so it's Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosure, nice snappy name. What was it, Charlotte? Sorry, Charlotte mentioned there is Task Force on Nature-Related Financial Disclosure. Have I lost myself? No. Surrey Wildlife Trust have just launched something for businesses along that route, haven't they, Claire? So that business breakfast that I went to at Mandalay Hotel, they were looking at how they can start getting people to report along those sort of lines. So there is stuff happening, and there is potential opportunity to try and do that. I can't remember who was looking after it, if it was Sarah Jane or what, but that might be something that we could circulate afterwards to see if people can start trying to get businesses out to this sort of thing, because well done for doing that. It sounds really good. And it's really hard, even on the social value front. We have the contract as contracts worth millions of pounds, and when you actually try and get money out of that social value contract, it is a piddly amount. It hardly delivers anything. They just want to volunteer. So. Yeah. Yeah, so I think that is probably a good route through probably Surrey Wildlife Trust. If those guys are handling it, we could maybe have a chat with Sarah Jane about it or something.
Thank you very much. I think we'll take one more before we close up. Okay?
And that means that those 70 towns and cities, that if they invested in, that their subcontractors would benefit from. Mm-hmm. It's that simple. Thank you.
Okay.
Yes, thank you. My name is Sophie. I'm a climatologist. Thank you to the network, Reclaim Network, for this multidisciplinary network. My question is not directly for the panel session, but I think for the Reclaim Network itself and the air quality. Talking about air quality and air pollution, when I arrived to this conference this morning, I walked by foot for 15 minutes from home to the University of Surrey. But I know that some of us drove 5-6 hours to come to Guildford. I wonder if the Reclaim Network has members from public transport department. I'm talking about trains and buses because I know that traveling by trains and buses are more expensive than driving, but it could contribute to reduce air pollution every day. So that's my question. Thank you.
Yeah, so I think it's a very interesting question, and I would possibly ask my colleagues to answer this question if they can. But just to say that if you go outside, there is a interactive display system which basically allows you to understand your exposure. So it's a very fun learning kind of system outside. So it tells you that when you go from your home to your work, based on the choices you make, what sort of exposure levels you get, how you can reduce the exposure. So that's basically some of the work, for example, we have been doing as part of, the air pollution, the reduction measures, especially for the exposure. As far as the network is concerned, I believe that the active travel and lots of other things, we always kind of, be promoting it. but it's not really directly been on the, on the scope, or maybe say the agenda to look into the bus services or the train services, which is a bit more complex issue, I believe. So if any of your colleagues wants to make any comment on that.
I feel like I've talked a lot.
I got here by train. There we go. I walked here as well from the train station. In fact, this morning we had a little minibus that we could have come from the hotel, and some of us walked instead because it was a nice day. So I've managed to not use any internal combustion engine.
Did the hotel put that on?
No, we didn't.
Oh, you did, right. Okay.
By not knowing that it will be a good day, we thought it might be raining.
Okay.
I just didn't want people to lose on the way.
I came from Exeter, and all I can say, it was like it worked, so I didn't have to, I started early, but the timing of the conference, it was perfect, so I could leave home early, but take various trains, and I can go back home by train and walking from the station. Other places might not be possible. If we are done, I would just want to say 30 seconds something, if there are no other questions or if we finish. Only because I don't think we touched on it. We touched on many things where to green-blue infrastructure would benefit. We talk about inequality and all that. One thing I don't feel, because it has come out, is about looking at climate change. You don't want, one other thing to consider is you don't want to put trees in places that there will be water shortage. And so effectively, water shortage and resourcing. Water has become a very good commodity. There, in every urban environment, every county, whatever, there are hotspots that they are going to have issues. So you don't want to put new development there. You don't want to, you have to think maybe species or how you do it. So it's not all trees, any trees everywhere, because you don't want to increase the water shortage effectively. So there are other considerations that relate to climate change. That's all. Do you feel that?
I think I fully agree with the point that considering the unintended consequences is very important. It's not just the water shortage. In fact, if you, let's say, put a big tree in the street canyon environments where you have a very little space, you will make the air pollution level worse rather than improving it. So, I mean, we contributed to this, the guidance that was published by City Hall in London in 2019. So that talks about that. And then we have a follow-up guidance. It's basically noting these points on do's and don'ts. So because the problem with the green infrastructure or the blue infrastructure is that once you put it in, and if you want to remove it, let's say put a tree and you want to take it out, there will be a lot of the outcry in the public, and people will not be very happy. So it's really important that those decisions are made considering several aspects in terms of their maintenance, in terms of the water need, whether they're improving those things. They're not producing the pollens, they're not producing the biogenic volatile organic compounds, otherwise with the NOx and sunlight it can create ozone, is another problem. And also they're not really the species which are toxic or are growing very quickly. So you can have the maintenance issues as well. So while this is something which really is a good way of mitigating the climate adaptation, so there is a lot of conscious thoughts needs to go into the planning and designing and implementing these things. And this is where the network comes in to understand the holistic nature of these green and blue infrastructure and putting people together, putting the knowledge together so that you can have an informed decision making.
And the other quickly point, which I haven't thought it before extensively, and now it will haunt me for a long time, is like you identify hotspots of vulnerability, you put your green-blue infrastructure there, the prices increase, so you remove the vulnerability, or you improve things by pushing the people out, so rich people come, the same people. So effectively, this is not the solution, really, because you have moved the vulnerable people to another area. So really scares me. And so solutions have cascaded, things that are unintentional, but we should start thinking about.
Yeah. Perfect. So I think we are coming to an end of this session. I think I haven't done that badly by being 3 minutes late. But can we give a big round of applause to our panel members? So we got a short mid-afternoon refreshment break, so there will be tea, coffees there. So I would welcome you to grab your tea, coffee, and 2:50 sharp. Let's come back with very interesting session, which has got a flash presentations from a lot of case studies. Okay, see you then. Thank you very much.